So hello, and if you've just followed me over from the vegetable patch plan, then hello again. Or if you've just joined me to hear about the flowers, then welcome. But basically what I'm going to do in this video is talk about my allotment plans, but in particular the plans for the flower patch and the wildlife patch. I have already talked about all the vegetables that I'm going to be growing and the fruit, and you can find that video on the YouTube channel. But what I thought I'd do is I'll just do them in two different videos because I talk about it quite a lot and I need to fit quite a lot in. And I thought some people might not want to hear about the flowers and vice versa, so I just put them into two separate videos. So I just need to find the plans and put the jammy dodgers away. I've got so many plans, it's crazy. What we'll do first is we'll talk about the wildlife patch. Now this area hasn't really changed much. It's not really going to change much because the pond takes up the majority of the space. But what I wanted this area to be is to be the area which I don't really touch that much. I want it to be for the wildlife. So, you know, in that sense, I don't really want to be messing with it too much. And because I've changed around the flower patch area, I've moved I'm going to move all the perennial flowers over to the wildlife patch. So the anemone is going to move over there, and the Cirsium, Rivular, Atropoperium is going to go over there as well. I think that's all the perennial flowers I have really that are going to be moving over there. The rest is basically going to be herbs, pretty herbs and edible flowers. There's going to be a lot more of them growing on the allotment this year because I've been reading and researching more into herbal remedies and herbal teas and making my own cleaning products and beauty products and things like that. So I've really got into that. So I'm trying to squeeze as many herbs as I can into my allotment. So in this patch there's going to be a borage, there's going to be some calendula. Now the varieties will be Indian Prince and a touch of red buff. There's also going to be some chives and some lady's mantle. So like I said, these herbs I've chosen specifically because I've researched into them and I want to use them for particular things, which is why I've chosen them. There's also Katie's Rose by the Shed. I'm sorry, I don't know the real name for that. It was gifted to me and it was just called Katie's Rose, so I don't know the real name for that. And there's a Penny Lane Rose which is climbing up the side of the shed. There's also a Karoo grass there called Ice Dance, which I put there specifically for the frogs to provide all year round cover for them, and so far it's done amazingly well. And even though I haven't seen any frogs for a while, I'm hoping that they enjoy it. And also by the grass there's a little toad house as well. And I remember last year I lifted up the toad house and there was a frog sitting in there and it literally made my year. Like, I thought it was just one of those things like, oh, toad house, no, like toads aren't going to go in there, frogs aren't going to, you know, hide in there. But he was sat there and he looked so happy. If frogs can look happy. So yeah, it does work. And inside the pond there's a water iris and a water forget-me-not. The pond needs cleaning out drastically. So much mud has fallen into the bottom that it's half full up with mud now, and I think it's affecting the frogs because I haven't seen any frogs in a while now. So what I'm going to do before it gets to the frog spawning time is empty the pond out a little bit, put it into buckets so the insects, you know, can stay there. Take the mud out and then put the water back in and fill it back up with water again, because the water tank is actually nearly full with water, so there's lots of nice rainwater to go back into the pond. But that's a job for another day because that's going to be a big one. And even though I love frogs, like they still scare me a little bit. Like, they don't scare me, but they just make me jump. Like, if I see one, I'm like, oh my god, there's a frog, sort of thing. I don't know why, because I love frogs. And then there's going to be a row of giant sunflowers along the back of the fence, which I always do. And there's a grapevine called Flame, which is growing up the side of the fruit cage. So that area is very much jam-packed. For such a small space, it's completely jam-packed. There's a couple of stepping stones there so I can get round to the other side of the pond. And I'm also going to be placing a bug hotel just on the edge by the path. That's just a wire mesh frame which I'm going to fill with branches and fir cones and things that I find out and about for insects to make their home in. I was going to place a hedgehog house in this area, but I thought it would be best not to because there's a pond there. I don't want them falling into the pond. Even though I've made a ramp there for things to get out of, I just thought it would be best to have a hedgehog house away from the pond, basically. And last but not least, in this area there is going to be a tub just outside the shed with some spearmint in it. Because that's quite evasive, I'm going to be putting it in a container and using it for herbal teas and things. So that is that area. It's mainly herbal and perennial, with the odd grapevine and bug hotel and toad house thrown in there. But like I said, I wanted that area to be for the wildlife, and the bees are really going to like the borage. So it's going to be a win-win situation, hopefully. Next we'll go on to the area next to the shed, the other side of the wildlife patch. The other side to the shed, sorry, I'm getting all confused now. And I'm calling this the allotment care patch because I feel like everything needs a name on my allotment. And this area has a manure bin in it. Well, it's going to have a manure bin in it. I need to make it yet, but I've got all the materials. So it's going to have a manure bin in there with a shelf along the top to put my homemade fertilisers. And next door to that, in the corner, there's a tub with comfrey in it, which I'm going to make my homemade fertiliser out of. I bought it last year and it's established really well, so hopefully next year I'll be able, well, this year, I'll be able to make some fertiliser from the leaves. There's going to be various pots there with other herbs in, but I'll go into the herbs a little bit later on. There's also the water tank next to the shed, and I need to put the guttering on the shed. But in front of the water tank there's a old feeding trough where some chamomile is going to live to fuel my chamomile tea addiction. There's also a little bit of storage area at the back of the water tank where all the bamboo canes and bean poles will live when they're not in use. And then along the back of the fence there are going to be 6 Mongolian giant sunflowers. They grew really well there last year. They grew to well over 10 foot, which I was so pleased with. So hopefully this year they'll do just as well. And in front of the sunflowers there's going to be 3 rhubarb crowns, which I need to buy yet, so I'm not sure about the variety that I'm going to choose. But there's going to be 3 because the idea is to use my rhubarb forcer on one rhubarb, obviously once it's fully established. And then every year I'll swap the rhubarb forcer over to the next rhubarb just to give them all enough time to sort of recuperate. And that's that area. In front of that is the Tulip Trough. And I've gone into the tulip varieties which I've grown in a previous video where I planted the tulips. I think it was back in November, so I won't go into them too much now. But there's tulips, narcissus and ranunculus in there, and then obviously once they've died back there will be the squash and the gherkin in there as well. And then next we'll go on to the flower patch, which I'm so excited about. Like, I love growing flowers nearly as much as I love growing vegetables. Like, when I first got the allotment it was all about vegetables. I was like, got to grow vegetables. But over time I realised how important it is to have flowers, and even if you just have a small amount of flowers to bring in the bees, it's so important. So I'm trying to grow as much flowers as I can for both me and for the bees and the wildlife and things like that. So this area has had a little bit of a change. The original plan was to change it completely and to put raised beds in the place, because even though I was sort of happy with the space, I thought it was a little bit of a waste, and I felt a little bit overwhelmed by the border, and also I felt like it wasn't very organised, in the sense that I just planted the flowers where I wanted, and then I sort of forgot about them. So I've decided to grow my flowers in rows. What I haven't decided, or I've decided against, is not to have raised beds, because I don't know how long I'm going to have the allotment for. Obviously I'd like to move up to Wales at some point, and I don't want to be spending loads of money on raised beds or changing, you know, the flower patch area if I'm going to be, you know, leaving the allotment in a year or so. So I thought the best thing to do was to keep the border, move the perennial flowers over to the wildlife patch, and to create rows inside the border. So that's what I've done. So it has changed, but it hasn't changed, if you know what I mean. There's still going to be a few perennial flowers there. I've kept the globe artichoke in the far corner because that's going to be beautiful to look at, and also it's edible. There's also going to be a row of foxgloves and a row of hollyhocks along the corner there. What I wanted to do was create a sort of barrier against me and the rest of the allotment site, because when I sat in that particular area, I wanted to be, you know, have a sort of peaceful, relaxing area. So I thought if I grew taller varieties of flowers, then it will create a sort of barrier to the other people on the site. Because even though I like the other people on the site, there are times when you do just want to sit there and have a cup of tea. Plus I love foxgloves and hollyhocks anyway. So there's also going to be some verbena dotted around the place, because I love verbena. I'm also going to grow some fennel and a rosemary bush as well for my new herbal addiction. And there are 2 patches of Allium giganteum, I think they're called, in front of the trough, which I planted out last year for the first time. I'm very excited to see them grow. And there's a little lavender hedge entrance will be going into the flower patch area. I have 2 lavender bushes already, but I love them so much. Like, I love lavender, so I thought I need to have more. And what better way to have them is then to have a little hedge into the flower patch. So I need to buy 5 more. They're dwarf lavenders, so I need to have a look out for dwarf lavenders. And then last but not least, for these sort of perennial flowers that are going there, are Dewy Dahlias. I really love dahlias. I've always been a little bit threatened by them. I don't know why, because, you know, so many people grow them already and they're always so beautiful. But I've taken the plunge, and I think it was November, or it might have been October, I pre-ordered some dahlias, because last year I missed out on the variety which I wanted to grow. So I thought I'll pre-order them this time, and, you know, I'll definitely have the ones that I want to grow. So the 3 that I've chosen are Labyrinth, Caffeulay and Polverton Cristobal. Now that last one is going to be particularly special because my mum is called Cristobal, and it's not very often, you know, you find anyone called Cristobal, let alone a flower, let alone a dahlia. So when I saw it on display at one of the garden shows we'd done, I just had to have it, so I pre-ordered it. I think the tuber was out of stock, so I had to order the plant, but that will be here in April. and the other two are tubers, so they should be here very soon. I'm so excited. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them up and get them having a head start as well. So yeah, I'm really excited about the dahlias, so excited. There's also an apple tree there, which I always forget is there, but like it's the biggest thing there. It is still small, but it's growing, and I'm happy with its growth, so it's getting there. And I think the last thing to do is to go on about the annual flowers which I'll be growing in that patch. So let's just get the list up here. So like I said, I'm going to grow the annual flowers in rows this year. I think it'll be better for me to keep an eye on them, to know what varieties where, and hopefully it's going to look nice as well. So I've chosen my favourites, ones that I've grown before, or ones that I think are gonna look particularly nice as cut flowers. So there is going to be roughly about 3 or 4 rows of each variety, but I'll just go through the varieties quick. So there will be 2 varieties of Scabies, one called Stern Kugel and one called Black Knight. 2 zinnias, one called Cinderella Peach and one called Queen Red Lime. There will be 2 varieties of Calendula, Indian Prince and Touch of Red Buff. There will also be some Honesty called Alba, some Ami Magus, some Feverfew. There will also be 2 varieties of Sunflower, a dwarf variety called Sonia and Mongolian Giant, placed around the edge of the flower patch. There will also be 2 varieties of Poppy, one called Lauren's Grape and one called Lilac Peony. And there will also be 2 varieties of Cosmos. One is a mixed variety from Sarah Raven, which I grew last year, and the other one is called Xanthos, which is a stunning pale yellow. I've never seen a yellow Cosmos before, so I'm really excited to grow that. I'd just quickly like to mention I'm very excited about the Touch of Red Buff Calendula. I always grow the orange one and I always love it, but this one is a beautiful shade of like vintage pink. Like, oh, it sounds so nice. And the zinnias look beautiful as well, and the Stern Kugel Scabious is one of my favourite. It's particularly nice when it's a dried seed head. It's the most unusual but beautiful thing I've ever seen. So yeah, they are my favourite cut flowers to grow. The new ones which I'm trying is a dwarf variety of sunflower. I love sunflowers, so I thought if you could have smaller sunflowers to have in your cut flowers, then it would be the best thing ever. And I'm going to grow the Honesty to use the dried seed heads for display as well. And the Feverfew for herbal remedies and things. So I think that's about it for the flower patch. So I'll just quickly go through now the herbs that I'm growing. I've probably mentioned them already, but I just want to go through them separately because I am so excited about growing herbs this year. It's one of the things which I really researched into and really planned. So in the flower patch there's going to be some fennel, lavender, calendula, feverfew, sunflower, hollyhock and rosemary. So you can use all these things in teas and in, you know, body products and home cleaning products, all things you can make yourself. The hollyhock I'm especially excited about because you can use the leaves. So yeah, that's what herbs will be growing in the flower patch. In the wildlife patch there will be borage, lady's mantle, calendula, rose and sunflower. Again, all things you can use in herbal teas. In various containers around the allotment, I will be growing specific things that either I didn't have space for in the flower patch or wildlife patch, or things that are very invasive. For instance, skullcap, lemon balm and spearmint. They are very invasive, so if you plant them in the ground they will spread like mad, so I decided to put them in containers around the allotment. There's also going to be some sage and some chamomile in containers as well. They're not so invasive, it's just I didn't have any room to put them anywhere else. I'll also be doing some companion planting, so there's going to be the chives in the wildlife patch, but I'll also be planting some dill and some nasturtiums amongst the brassicas. I'd like to do more companion planting, but because there's not going to be any room in the potato bed, there's not going to be any room in the legume bed. The only bed that has room and that I know that it works in is the brassica bed. Also, the nasturtiums provide great ground cover, so they will help to stop the weeds from growing. And obviously you can eat them as well, which is a win-win situation for me. So that's all, yeah, that's all the herbs and all the flowers. Like, I think for me this year I'm more excited about the flower part. I've been planning the allotment since October. Like, obviously not all the time. Like, it hasn't been that hard, but I wanted to make sure I was growing the things that I wanted to grow. So the herbs have been researched. I've been looking through books, like this one for instance, which is now one of my favourites. It's called Infuse by Paula Granger and Karen Sullivan. But they've got herbal teas in there, so I've been picking, you know, the ones that I like the sound of, the ones, you know, that I like, that I want to use, and been picking out the herbs that they use just so I can grow them and make my own, basically. So yeah, I'm very excited about this, and for the first time in a long time I'm actually really organised. Like, I've made a spreadsheet of when I need to sow the flowers, when they need to be planted out, when they need to be harvested, things like that, which will just make life so much easier. So it is worth planning. And I'll just quickly mention that I use graph paper for my plans, just to keep everything to scale. But yeah, I think I've covered everything. But I will just quickly mention, I think I mentioned in the vegetable video already, but in case you haven't caught that, then I'll just say it here as well. The plans will be over on the blog. Every detailed picture, every seed packet, every variety that I'm going to be growing will be listed over on the blog. So if I've missed a couple of things, or if I've talked too much, or if it's all just a bit too much, then head on over to blog and everything will be listed there, and you can see the plans in a more detailed way there as well. But looking out of the shed door now, everything's wet and soggy and miserable, and it's been raining all day even when it wasn't forecast to rain. It just looks so sad, but I think one of the reasons why I've been planning so much is because it's been such a bad winter, and I'm so looking forward to spring. Like, I love every season, but there's only so much rain you can have, seriously. So I'm very much looking forward to spring and summer. And even though I know it's going to be a hectic one, I hope that my plans and my organisational skills will help me this year in creating an allotment full of flowers and vegetables to eat. But I really hope you've enjoyed the video and that you've been inspired, or, you know, you've been shown a flower that you'd quite like to grow yourself. And if you have any questions, then please just comment below or send me a message, and I would love to help. But I think that's about it. My tea's probably cold now. But it's starting to get dark, so I'm going to pack up and head on home, I think. So thank you for watching, and happy planning.